Good morning and welcome back to the Johnson Space Center for our STS-84 post-landing news conference. With Atlantis safely back at the Kennedy Space Center, joining us today to talk about the end of the flight are Tommy Holloway, the Space Shuttle Program Manager, Frank Culbertson, the Shuttle Mir Phase 1 Program Manager, and today's Entry Flight Director, Wayne Hale. And we'll start off with Tommy.
Good morning. As you know, we just completed the STS-84 flight, the seventh visit to the Mir station and sixth docking flight. As one of my colleagues says, things were perfect in every way. And sometimes when we realize that these things are happening, we don't really appreciate all of the hard work and attention to detail, the diligence and dedication of the team that it takes to do that. So my congratulations to all the people across both the Phase 1 program and the shuttle program and our Russian partners that make this big system come together and enable us to make a big job look very easy from the casual observer's point of view. So again, my congratulations to the entire team. And with that, Frank, I'll let you talk about the details.
Thanks very much, Tommy. And we certainly agree with what Tommy said. People took a very complex situation and made it look simple, and I think that's a credit to the ability of the people involved as well as the machines that have been built and the people who designed them. So we appreciate the performance of the shuttle program in enabling Phase 1 to continue the way it has. Certainly the transfer of logistics and crew members went very well. Mike is already operating on board the Mir and getting very well settled there, and will continue his operations through this coming week per the plan. Jerry, as you know, is back, and I'm sure very happy to be back on Earth and looking forward to seeing his family very soon and getting underway with his debriefing and rehabilitation program. This mission was very successful for us. We transferred more hardware than we had in the past. Over 6,500 pounds total of hardware plus 1,000 pounds of water. That brings us to a total in the program that might be of interest to you of over 24,000 pounds of hardware transferred up and down on the shuttle during the time that we've been operating with the Mir. And that's a lot of hard work on people's part and an increasing efficiency that I think will serve us well in the future International Space Station operations. The MOD team did a great job of executing this mission. The flight crew, as you saw, operated very well as a crew of 10 people all working together. It was hard to tell which spacecraft they were from as they operated up there together, and probably had to do a lot of sorting before they closed the hatch. But they did a terrific job also. And of course, the mission continues with Mike Foale on board the Mir and the people supporting him in Moscow and Star City. And of course, the cosmonauts are continuing their program and will be up there until August of this year when they come home on a Soyuz. So we're very proud of what everybody has done, and thanks to the shuttle program and to MOD and all the other people that were involved. And we're looking forward to the continuation and, of course, the upcoming mission in September with STS-86 to continue the Phase 1 program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Wayne, who will explain how we pulled this off.
Thank you. Well, today we had a very nice landing. We had a little bit more challenge from the weather than we had thought we would a couple of days ago. You know, on launch day, it was a very, very easy call, as a matter of fact, but Mother Nature made us pay for that a little bit this morning. We were challenged by the low clouds that kept us from landing on the first opportunity at the Kennedy Space Center. And we were concerned that we might have some rain showers starting to develop, and in fact, I expect those probably will develop later on in the day. But our weather forecaster, Mr. Wayne Baggett from the Spaceflight Meteorology Group, looked at all that very carefully and was able to give us a go forecast. We looked at it right down to the wire, and in fact, we had good conditions at landing. The crew actually said they saw the field from an altitude of 12,000 feet, which is, gosh, almost twice as high as we need to see it. And the winds, of course, were a little bit of a challenge to us too today. They came up a little bit stronger on the second opportunity than they would have been on the first landing opportunity, and that posed a bit of a piloting challenge, but as you saw, it was a safe landing. Everything went very well, and we really had nothing to report on the orbiter. Atlantis operated flawlessly again, and we're happy to turn it back over to the Kennedy Space Center folks to get it ready for its next journey into space a little bit later this year. And I think that's all I have this morning.
Thanks, Wayne. We'll take questions here in Houston before going down to the Kennedy Space Center for questions, and we'll start off with Mark Carreau.
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. I have one question for Frank Culbertson. Could you, I know you touched on this, but maybe comment a little bit more on your first reports of how Dr. Leninger is as he landed, and also how Mike Foles' first few days have been, how he's adapting to his new home.
Well, actually, I haven't had any reports on the condition of the crew other than that they're all in the CTV and all doing fine. As far as Mike goes, he is doing very well and has been talking to the crew, or to the team on the ground led by Keith Zimmerman, and they say he sounds really good. Is enthusiastic about getting started with some things that are optional at this point, but that he wants to go ahead and begin. And is getting settled and figuring out where everything is and unpacking and normal things from moving into a new house or a new apartment and figuring out where to put things so you can operate efficiently. But my impression is that he's very enthusiastic about being there. He's getting along very well with his cosmonaut crewmates and looking forward to a very successful mission.
Okay, we'll go down to Atlantis' landing site at the Kennedy Space Center now for questions.
This is Sue Butler for the AP. Would someone please tell us whether Leninger did walk off into the crew transfer vehicle or whether he was carried, and give us an update on him?
Well, actually, we don't know the answer to that. And in fact, I'm not sure how you, Sue, would define walking off. Nobody's less than 40 inches tall, so everybody actually crawls off or is helped through the hatch. So not sure how to define that, but I'm sure Jerry came off with people standing by and helping as necessary, and maybe in a couple of weeks you can ask Jerry that when he's available to the crew, to the press.
This is Seth Bornstein from the Orlando Sentinel for Tommy. Now I guess the attention turns to 83R, 94, whatever number it is these days. And how are you fairly happy with the rapid turnaround, and does this mark something for the future?
Well, at this point in this activity of getting ready to fly what we're calling 94, 1st of July, I believe we're at this point we're back on what is close to a normal schedule and normal set of activities in the preparation cycle, and with its normal set of situations we have to deal with along the way. So at this point, I'm very pleased with the progress of preparing to launch in July, and also I'm excited about the opportunity to have done this in terms of demonstrating the flexibility that and robustness that we do have in the program, and looking forward to being able to provide those kind of services in the future when they're required.
Okay, and one more from me for Wayne. I thought about a half hour I heard before landing, I heard there was the ceiling was 7,500. At that point, were you kind of nervous about the weather conditions?
Well, I'm not sure that nervous is the right word. We kind of expect a challenge in the weather sometimes, and today was a challenging day, and we were all hoping that the weather would turn around and be go for us. You can't really manage the weather. The weather is what the weather is, and it's either good enough to land or it's not good enough to land, and it's a matter of being set up and ready to go, and when you get to the decision point, it's go, and the forecaster says that it's going to stay that way, or it's not, and you don't land. Maybe a little disappointment rippled through the room when we had to wave off the first opportunity, because, as you know, when the mission's complete, we're all ready to land, and I think everybody was ready for us to land today.
This is Phil John Earth News, also for Wayne. What were the conditions at landing? Looking at the windsock, it looked like you had a fairly decent tailwind component. I assume you lived with that because of the lighting conditions? That's very, very accurate. We like to land in the morning hours on the runway from the south toward the north on the 3-3 runway to put the sun at the pilot's back so that we don't worry about any haze on the windows or anything of that sort having a glare that might cause them any problems as they fly the final approach. So we stayed with the 3-3 runway to about the tailwind limit. I didn't get the exact reading that we had at touchdown, but we were very close to the limit that we have in the certification spec for the vehicle. at least sometimes during the descent. So we were watching that very closely. We knew the other end of the runway, 15, would be perfectly acceptable if we needed to go there, and it gets to be a trade-off between which constraint or which desire you would like most to have. And today, as you saw, the landing on 3-3 worked out well for us.
I guess for Frank, the water samples that were taken aboard Mir, what's the schedule on when they get turned? I assume they're in Space Hab. Do they get yanked out immediately over at the Space Hab facility when they get turned over to the Russians? And when do you expect to get an answer of yes or no? Is the water that's aboard Mir good enough to use, or does it have to be tossed away?
Well, I don't know the exact time they'll come off the orbiter, but it generally takes us a week or two to get the answer to these type of analyses.
Craig Cavalt with Aviation Week for Wayne, and a couple of questions. First, can you discuss that trim call at about 6 minutes out? And then second, to follow on the wind questionnaire, just discuss what the tailwind limits are these days, please.
You know, we set up an orbiter specification way back in the beginning of the program 15 or more years ago that said that 15 knots on the tail was the limit that we would operate the vehicle. And we've done a lot of testing since then, and we really don't think there's a concern. Normally, of course, you'd like to land an airplane into the wind. But we really don't think there's a great deal of concern with tailwinds other than it makes you land faster and you worry about the tires and that sort of thing. Today, our analysis that we do using all the balloon data and our simulation of the orbiter landing that we perform for every landing approach, using every set of winds that we got in, was always in good condition. We never came close to any of the limits on the tires or the landing gear or any of the other hardware or systems on board the orbiter. So from that sense, one can conclude that maybe our tailwind limit that's on the books is a tad conservative. But again, it becomes a discussion of which is the more desirable thing that you'd like to have. Would you like to have the sun behind you, or would you like to have the wind on your nose? And today, the way that trade came down is we'd take a little bit of tailwind to keep the sun behind us. And I think that's kind of a piloting decision. And I know that when we get ready for every flight, I have a discussion with every commander on their preferences on a number of things and their flying particulars on how they do things. And Charlie was quite strong that he would prefer to have the sun at his back and would take a large tailwind if that's what it took to keep the sun at his back. And we were happy to accommodate that today. And it was, I've got to really rush in and say it was perfectly safe. We didn't violate any limits. And as you saw, the landing was a very nice landing today.
And the trim question there, the ground called up a trim panel.
Oh, yeah. One of the procedures that we do is we use the trim switches for the derotation, you know, to minimize the loads on the tire. Once the main gear is on the runway to pitch over to nose gear touchdown, we use a trim switch. And we just had a check on those switches at about 6 minutes to landing. There's a call out on the checklist, and there's 3 or 4. There's a power on and an enable, and one of the switches got overlooked, and that's what the ground is there for, to help the crew remember those things.
So he had it in the wrong position, or?
And in fact, it was off, and that's not a problem because we train the crews to back that up so that if it doesn't work right, he's trained to manually derotate the vehicle, and that's not a problem either. It's another one of those margin enhancement kind of things that we do to make life a little easier for us.
And not to belabor the wind thing there, Wayne, but was he a little fast at touchdown, or was he right on?
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait till we get the playback data. You know, we dump the recorders on the runway, and that stuff's got to be played back in and processed by the computers, and I probably won't know that answer until the first working day, which I guess will be Tuesday next week. But it didn't appear to me to be fast. As a matter of fact, it appeared he touched down about where we predicted. You know, the black stripes on the runway are about 2,500 feet from the threshold, and we predicted that he would touch down about 2,700 feet, and in fact he did touch down a little past those black stripes, so I suspect he was pretty much on speed, give or take a few knots.
Hanson Heaton, OTV, or Orlando Television. What are the safety precautions taken for the astronauts and ground crew in the event of a bad landing? For example, the landing gear not operating.
Well, let's see. I guess I can take that on. You know, the convoy crew has a wide variety of exercises. They do all kinds of fire drill type preparations. We have fire crash and rescue people on scene, and they actually do practices 2 or 3 times a year for different sorts of things, whether the orbiter were to run off the runway or land off the runway or those kinds of things, or crew bailout. Those are all practiced. We certainly hope those are extremely remote and events that we never have to deal with, but we've got to be prepared. And we run a number of exercises every year at the Kennedy Space Center and also at the Dryden Flight Research Center to simulate those kinds of emergencies. And I know in the Mission Control Center, gosh, we practice our end of those things almost weekly, it seems like, in some of our integrated training sessions. So we're really prepared, although we really hope that never happens.
Doug Nurse with the Tampa Tribune. I guess this would be for Frank. What additional knowledge have you gained from Leninger's stay in space?
Well, we've learned a lot while he was up there. We're looking forward to debriefing with him so we can get firsthand access to that information and that experience. And I know Jerry's got a lot that he wants to share with us. But we certainly learned during his mission that there are things about managing a station that we need to expand on, and things about the systems maintenance and systems repair that we learned a lot about. The fire, of course, was an episode that I think was very instructional to everybody, as well as a very significant event. We learned that on a station, unlike a shuttle, which would probably return home immediately after an event like that, the station you want to keep manned if it's still viable and still habitable, and so you've got cleanup plans you've got to have in place, and similar to on a ship where you would have damage control plans that would take care of any significant event and would continue operation of the ship, you need to do the same plan for a station. And so the ISS people are also looking at that and what their plans are and procedures, and I believe it was a good reminder to everybody that we need to think about those type of things ahead of time differently than we do for short duration flights.
Hi, this is Bill Horowitz, CBS, with a question for Wayne. And Wayne, I missed your opening remarks, so I apologize if you've already gone over this. The replays of landing, the shot looking down the runway head-on at the orbiter, when he flared right before touchdown, he drifted pretty significantly to his left. And I was wondering, more than I've ever seen anyway on a landing, or maybe going back to 51D, I remember that Carol Bobko had a similar effect. And I was wondering if the crosswinds, you know, if you had any reports that the winds were a little higher, what could account for that? It looked unusual to me.
Well, I would say that was a moderate kind of an event. We've seen some that have been more than that. There were some gusty winds. The direction when you have a gust is not always the true average wind direction, and obviously Charlie was having to work a little more than maybe the average shuttle commander has to work to get it lined up. But I would caution you, those shots that you see are shot with telephoto lenses, and they make everything appear exaggerated, and he was pretty close to the center line the whole time. So I was never concerned. It looked like he had it in good control all the way down, and certainly wound up in good shape. So even though it was probably a little bit more of a challenge than the average shuttle landing, it wasn't terribly so.
This is Seth Borenstein again for Frank. Apparently, Catherine, Jerry's wife, said that except for the first week, there weren't any video teleconferences with family. Is this the case? What happened, and will Mike Foale get video teleconferences? Has this been fixed? What's the situation there?
Actually, I believe there was more than that, but there were a number of them canceled that we had hoped to have, but that was because the Russian Altair satellite was not as available as we had planned. When their other satellite failed, and they had no way of predicting that, I suppose, they decided to move the one that is currently operating from one position over the equator to another. And during that time, it was not available for video downlink or audio. And that significantly reduces their capability to communicate with the crew and add on extra things such as video teleconferences with families, etc. But I'm hoping that they will have this straightened out and repair the transmitter that actually we had to replace after 84, and it'll be a little more accessible for Mike.
So at the moment, how many are planned for Mike? 7, 4, 2, what?
I don't know the number. Typically, they'll do a video conference every other week if it's available.
Pete Galtieri with the West Kentucky News for Frank. The other day you admonished the press for asking about whether or not Jerry's going to walk out, but he was pretty emphatic about wanting to walk out. Basically, he's looking at it as a test to see whether a long-duration a space traveler could make an emergency egress, I guess. Did you talk to any of the other, well, Norm and all the other guys that came down? Have you talked to them about whether before they left, whether or not they wanted to walk out, and what their thoughts were on that? Did you talk to Jerry too on that?
Well, the medical people talked to him about these things, and they're all well aware that the when you come back from space flight, there's an adaptation period required, and nobody has gotten off the orbiter without assistance after that long in space. And I suppose the definition of walking or not walking is one that could be debated. But the main thing that I'm concerned about is the safety of the people coming home, and I want to make sure that we don't encourage people to do something beyond their capabilities because they may not be aware of what their limitations are when they first return. There are ways to test your ability to stand up and walk in a more controlled environment after you get off the orbiter, which is not a great laboratory for that kind of a test anyway. And so I think we can deal with this in the future. And if people decide that they want to stand up while they're on there, it's going to be very hard to stop them from doing that. But obviously the scientists would like to keep the data as clean as possible, and we try to balance that with the desire to prove what we can do when you've been in space for a long time and need to land.
Okay, and with the last question, again for Frank, just some information on the ISS. Are there going to be those, what is it, perchlorate, the oxygen generating stuff like the Mir has? Is that chemical, oxygen generator chemical going to be used on the ISS?
Yes, it will. In the Russian segment, that's planned for use on board ISS.
Okay, that was the final question down at the Kennedy Space Center. The crew is out of the orbiter, so we're going to turn programming back down to the Kennedy Space Center for the crew walk around and all the other post-landing activities. Thanks a lot.